Okay, guys, I think we're live on Facebook. And of course, we're live on Zoom. Hi, I'm Tracy Hazard. This is Feed Your Brand. And this is the third installment of our content strategy for 2019. Wouldn't you like to get your plan done early? So I welcome all of you who are joining me right now. And I see some familiar names. Hi, Chella. Hi, Rodney. And thanks so much for being here on our third installment. And today we're really going to talk about guests. And that is the interview strategy is a strategic part of podcasting. It really took off that way. There's kind of a historical basis for really growing shows. A lot of that comes from John Lee Dumas and that model of it. So I want to dive in. And I, as always, am a PowerPoint girl. So I am going to share with you my screen and we'll get started in on that. And we will also, I'm going to really quickly copy this so I can give this to you when the time comes. And there we go. So our goal, of course, is to get more next year, right? We all want to get more. There's something we want to get more of. And a lot of it is fans. This is what I hear. Fans, more leads, relationship building, those kinds of things. And so that's really where a great content strategy that involves guests can really help you. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the why. And then I'm going to talk about a little bit about the details about how we decide which guests to invite on and which ones are going to give us the most power so that we can really have a strategic plan and not just, let's make sure I have 52 weeks of guests, right? We want to do more than that. We want to go deeper. And then I'll take some questions at the end like I always do. And we'll kind of dive deep into what works for you and what you guys need. So as always, you want to be seen and heard. I'm just going to recap a little bit about what we covered in the last couple of webinars. There's 1.8 billion websites on Google. There's 50 million Facebook pages. Some of you are watching me on Facebook right now. You know, there's a lot of pages out there. But there are 3.5 billion new Google searches each day. And there are only 200,000 active podcasts. That means people posting and putting up new content all the time. And that's English speaking as well. And that's a pretty small pond to be working in. And think about when you have a question, when you have a burning issue, you Google it. Maybe you go look for a book, but maybe you also go look for a podcast, right? Edutainment. That's what I like to call what we're doing here. And that's part of our strategy for finding good guests too. We want them to be edutaining as well. So we want them to provide some education value. This is Tom and I. He's my partner and husband in this business. And you can find us on all of these podcasts that are here. You can also find us in a course on the Harvard Business Review, and you can find my column in Inc. So these are ways to get in touch with me and a way to listen and learn more, especially Feed Your Brand, which is the podcast for you digital marketers and podcasters out there. So you had an assignment last week. Hopefully you've done it. You were to listen, watch, and read your competition. You were to check the keywords. Boy, I can't talk today. Check the key terms and words on places like Google, Answer the Public. There was a bunch of other places we talked about, Google Trends. And then you were to make a topic list. And I told you also to, while you were there, listening, watching, and reading, was to also start making an ideal guest list. Start to think about people you could invite that you already know, but also people who your competitors may have touched base with, or people who are similar to them, and add them to your guest list. So we're going to use that today as the basis for what we're going to do going forward. So a guest strategy, why? Why do we need guests? Well, because you need more fans, and you can't just rely on your fans telling other fans. It's just slower, right? So we want to use other people's audiences, right? That's a faster way. So if they already have the fans that we want to tap into that and connect with them, and inviting them on as a guest is a great way to do that. You also need more authority. So you want to be associated with someone who is of higher value, right, to the marketplace or to the fans that you're looking to achieve. So thinking about it this way, if you want to become a celebrity, this is more of the Oprah effect, right? Oprah got herself above all of the celebrities she interviewed. She had higher influence as the interviewer. She had more connections. That audience belonged to her. So eventually that's what we want to do. But sometimes we have to associate ourselves right up next to those that have more authority in the marketplace. So we want to bring them on and put ourselves side by side with them and transfer that authority to us. So that's another reason why you may want a guesting strategy. Plus, you need to network more. Who doesn't need to network more, build more relationships? I like to use my podcast to help me continue to make sure that I'm touching base with all of those people in my network or expanding my reach beyond my network. And so I use it as a strategic networking opportunity and a relationship building opportunity. So that's one of the strategies that you can employ as well. It can also help you get more fans and stages. So this may also be a why. Why? Because when I have a podcast, when I'm utilizing my podcast, when I'm interviewing, when I'm doing these things, I am putting myself in a place at which I show event planners that I can carry an audience, right? That I can continually and consistently and constantly deliver them content. And so they know that will provide them value outside of the event. And that's really important as well. Oops, I leaned off of it. There we go. So raising our authority, right? And you know what? We're not going to make giant leaps and bounds every year, right? If you feel a little overwhelmed and you just need to raise your authority a few inches, a few good inches, right? Get a little taller in your marketplace. Stand above a group of people. That's all we're looking at doing here. We don't expect to accelerate this without a tremendous amount of effort, time, and money. So, this is all we need, though, to separate ourselves from the pack of competitors of which we are being held in right now, or the comparison to them, right? We want to raise our authority above that. So it doesn't need to be major, it just needs to be enough. So let's talk about strategic guests. What is a good guest? What's a strategic opportunity to have that guest on our show? What are they going to do for us? And just as importantly, what are they going to do for our audience? So strategic guests are good at sharing their audience, right? They want to share value. They want to share more. So we want to make sure that they're going to tweet out, to share on Facebook, to post out, to share on Instagram, whatever that is. They're good at sharing what they're doing, what it means, what they learned, who they interacted with. They're good at sharing those things because their audience cares, and that means that their audience will also navigate to you and be attracted to you in the same way that they're attracted to that person. So we want to have a lot of sharing going on. We want to also make sure that we're vetting and our guests, and that they're also current. So in other words, if they have a blog, make sure they're currently posting. If they have a Facebook page, make sure it hasn't, they didn't quit it 2015 or something like that. So we want to make sure that they're not too busy to continue to do that sharing and continue to do that. Sometimes the bigger the celebrity, the worse they are at these things. And so these are things that we need to vet out. And we want to make sure that they can build your business, which means that they must be able to serve your audience, right? They have to share something with them that is going to be of tremendous value to that audience, because otherwise, at the end of the day, it's not serving your audience, it's not going to attract the right people, and it's not going to build and serve your business either. So we really want to make sure they can do that. Can they add value? So we're going to first talk about vetting out every guest, because this is kind of, I'm going to take your list and we're going to screen it. So this is our first step that we do in taking a look at that list. So I do this when I'm going to write an Inc. article. When PR firms pitch me someone to be featured in my article, I do the same process, and I've taken this process and I've rolled it over and used it for our podcast guesting programs, and it's worked really well for me. So our goal is to use other people's audience. So we want to make sure they have the right kind of fans. So that's one of the reasons I told you to make sure you're listening to them, make sure you're checking them out, make sure you're watching their videos. These are also things you want to do with your guests. So we really have to check them out, because we want to meet this goal of, are their fans going to be the right people for us? Or possibly the right people. We may not know, and that's okay too, but we're just like, look, this person is big enough. They do have a fan base, and I think because of their messaging or because of the way they interact with an audience, their authenticity matches mine, and I think they might be valuable, and I think I might be able to serve their fans as well as gain new ones to mine. So that's one of the things we want to do. So how do I do that? Well, first thing, I Google search. That is the first thing I do with everyone, because at the end of the day, the big power in what we do at Brandcasters is to make sure that we're driving traffic to our website, right? And that comes from Google search. So we want to make sure that there's value in Google search. Are they able to be Googled? Do they come up on the first 3 pages of Google? Mostly on the first page. I mean, that's what your goal should be. They don't have to be number 1 and number 2, because a lot of those are, positioning things, but you want to see them on the first page at least. And you want to see not just their website or their name, you want to see content that they're putting out in that Google search. That's something that's important. So then I check that, of course. I click through it and I look at it, make sure it's current, make sure the links aren't broken, make sure it is really good content content. If there's videos there, I do what's the fourth thing on the list. I listen and watch, right? I go and I check them out to make sure that they're interesting, that that the content matches what I Googled, and that matches who they are and who they say they are. Then I do a social check. I check their social media platforms. I check, and you can do that straight off their website, because remember, most of them have all of the links on their website, right? Here's my LinkedIn profile. Here's my Facebook. And just go through and click those, make sure they're working, make sure that when you connect through them, you go, wow, they really are posting. They post pretty consistently. They post every week at least, maybe daily in some platforms or another. And, don't worry if they don't have all the platforms, because you know what, again, sometimes I check Twitter, but I really could care less. I'm checking Twitter to make sure that they're not trolling people or harassing people or expressing opinions that would be outside of what I think would be relevant to my audience. That's all I'm really doing on Twitter. I could care less if they have a Twitter audience, because it's not going to be my audience. So check the social media that matters to you most, but don't be afraid to check them all, just to make sure that they're, not putting out different personas, because that matters as well. And then I actually go through and check their website, make sure it's current, make sure it's up to date, make sure they have a press page, make sure that they have a blog, anywhere where they would be putting out information, and want to make sure that they're going to be able to put a link back. So they're going to be either able to put a blog post or a press page post and say they were on my show. That is something that I really want to make sure that they're current and that they do consistently. And this is, I get a lot of PR firms who push people through, and yet they don't maintain the website at all. And that is a huge mistake. I want to make sure that they say, hey, I was featured in Inc., and that it's going to show up, if not on their homepage, at least on their press page. And that's going to be a link back direct to the article. So I also check them and make sure they aren't just sending everything back to Inc.com or to main websites. You want to make sure that they're sending back to the subpages, because that is the most value for them, but it's also the most value for you as well. And then I really listen and watch. And there are three things that I listen and watch for. One is that they're really, their messaging and the way that they talk is a match for my audience. I want to make sure that they have something good to share. Number two, I want to make sure that they don't say the same thing on every interview. That soundbite kind of style is not something that I subscribe to. I do not want the same thing on my show that's been on 100 other shows. I've seen it done. You get it. I know immediately when they start talking. So I've learned to do my homework here and check it out before I agree to even interview them. So that's something really important. And then the third thing that you do is just make sure that they're really, that they have engagement. Like, do you start seeing comments? Do you want to comment? Like, does it invite engagement? Like, I think that is something that's really underestimated in the terms of, how we're putting out content today. If it doesn't really matter if it's if it's different, as long as it's going to engage conversation, because that's going to be really important to your audience as well. And it's going to draw the fans to do something with you, right? And so we want to do that. So this is called a platform. Do they have a platform? Are all these things in line? And if they don't have this, then I don't want to interview them. They're not in a place where I think that they're going to add value to my show. Now, that being said, there's one caveat to that. If I think they're up and coming, could really have a platform in very short time, maybe they're about to launch a book, or something's about to blow up for them because they're a startup. Even though I've done all of these things, I make sure that they have good team, good practices behind them. And I talk about making sure that they're going to put this on their website, and we have a conversation about that so that it does build their platform, so that the PR value that I'm giving them doesn't go to waste. And don't forget, you are providing them press value, PR value. And so you need to make sure they're going to take full advantage of that. And so I can help them grow their platform. And for that, there's a lot of gratitude that comes with it. And it does come back to you. So I do want to serve my relationship building and my community as well, my networking. So that's also a consideration for me. So I don't just shut someone down right away unless I really feel that they really are just, a lot of it's their ego, and they don't feel like they don't need to do this. They're too big and their name's too big. You know what? If they don't do this, it's not good for anyone. So does size matter? Size is not as important to me as engagement and the right fit fans. So that's what I say. The right fit matters more here. And when I look at that, I think about, it's the fan that they are carrying, or the users that they have on their membership site, if that's what it is, or maybe it is just the engagement that they're getting, the comments that they're getting. You're like, this is a right fit for my messaging. This is a right fit for what my business is about. This is going to be a right fit for me. So that matters more to me than the size of it. Wouldn't we all like to be on Tony Robbins' stage? In fact, Tony Robbins is on my list for next year of my getting on his podcast. So, we all have our reach, right? So thinking about those things, it's like, yes, at some point size matters, but it's not the most important thing. And really assessing this fit should come first, because if it's not a right audience, it's not a right audience. And then it won't add a lot of value to you. Remember to click out. So now let's determine share value, because remember we talked about whether or not they could share. They do share. So let's talk about whether or not there's going to be some kind of share value, because we want to make sure we're not just doing the same thing as everybody else. So we skip the Me Too guests, right? The ones everybody has on their show. I like to skip them because they're show hopping. They're doing all of that. They tend to say the same things. It's not actually adding a lot of share value to your site, because they're on a campaign of doing it. It's all about them. Those kind of guests are not my favorite. That's why I very rarely respond to, unless it's a really good guest, a really interesting right fit for my audience. I rarely respond to people soliciting me to be a guest. I usually go out and reach out and ask people to be on my show. I prefer it that way. But, if you're a relatively new show and you need to take all the solicitations, just really screen them and really check and make sure you're not in someone who's on a campaign, and you might be the first stop, but they're going to go on 20 other shows and say the exact same thing again and again. That's not going to serve you well, and it's really not going to help, because then they just, they won't be a draw to someone coming in to listen to them on your show. We want to make sure that they know how to share, like they share properly. They don't just go, oh, I was here. Like that they say, this was really great. I really enjoyed being on this podcast. Check out what they write when they share things. And so that's what I like to do. I also then like to see, do people then like it, engage with it, respond to it, congratulate them, whatever that might be. That's a sign of an engaged audience. So there is a lot more share value to what happens with that. Celebrity value. So this is my story about John Travolta. So I was on the City Summit stage, and I also do press behind there and write stories for them whenever they have a really interesting story that fits my column. I love to write about it. And they asked me, as I was not expecting this, but they said, John Travolta's team would like to have 5 media do red carpet interviews with him at the gala, and they want bloggers. And would you be one of them? And I was like, I don't really know if John Travolta has anything to contribute to a blog. My online column is about, design and innovation, but why not? It could be cool. Maybe he could have some interesting insights. So I was like, yeah, and it's an opportunity to meet John Travolta. So I thought, okay, fun. So I'll do it. So I go on the red carpet and I interview him, and I don't get I get like what sounds like rehearsed answers. So I ask him, when you come off of a bunch of maybe not great movies, I was trying to be nice, right? Of course, really bad movies. And you have a dip in your business, and then you come back with something great and big. How do you know that you should take that risk and do this risky thing? And he said, oh, I don't like to take risks in my business. And he gives me this whole line about, entrepreneurs are too risky. They take too much financial risk, like this whole thing. And so I was like, oh, what do I do with that? And so I was like, okay, well, let me flip to something I know he likes. Let me ask him a question about airplanes. And so I know he's passionate about flying. And so I asked him if what he thought of 3D printing airplane parts. And I realized as he's answering me that he has no idea what 3D printing is. So now I have to lead him to the answer of telling him what it is and telling him why I think it's great, so that then he could go, yes, oh yes, and then answer it in a more, he's like, yes, I think that would be great because it gets more people flying, it keeps those remote airports open, and he does get it at that point, and he says something interesting. So I was like, okay, good, I made something out of this. Well, a week later, I'm on a radio show that was Inc. Radio we're listening to, he was also on the red carpet. And so I'm listening to his sound bites from it. And his sound bite is about entrepreneurs not taking risk. It's the exact same sound bite. And after the interview, this is with Alan Taylor, who's a radio host, and Alan and I, Alan, he said the exact same thing to me, and I put it in my article. I'm going to have to strip that out because I don't want it to be the same thing as yours. And then right after that, I read it in an article in Forbes, the exact same quote. So here now we all have the same thing. I'm the last one to post my article because mine was going out that afternoon, and I had to rewrite the whole thing. There was no value in it. So here they are. They asked for bloggers. We get the same thing all the time. Not a great interview. I managed to structure an article out of it. And when I share it, nothing happens. Nothing happens when I post it. His team doesn't share it. They don't do anything. I made them look good, and nothing happens from it. I didn't get any value from it. It was probably my least read article of the year. So when I think about that, that's kind of in my message in my back of my mind is we really have to check the share. Are they really doing something with it? Especially the ones who have a team, because the PR's firm job is to get the interview, not to share it, not to do anything with it. That's not their job. That's the marketing team's job. So we really have to make sure that when we're doing these hire celebrities, that we are going to be able to get value because our business depends on it more than theirs does. So this is my kind of side story about it. Nope, got to click it again. So, I hit the light. So let's move on to some prepping great questions. As I kind of alluded to in there, you got to be really flexible and prepared because sometimes you get in situations you don't know. There is an entire podcast on this called Structuring the Best Interview Questions. There's a Facebook Live on it. It's also on feedyourbrand.co. And so you can listen to my whole entire spiel on this. I'm just going to go through this really quickly. These are some things you should also prepare and kind of have in your back pocket, especially as you're doing the research on these guests. And while you're doing the research, I like to gather a couple of these questions. The number 2. So one is an at ease questions, which is really just simple. I'm going to put them at ease, make sure that they are comfortable on my show, make sure that they know what the show's about. So sometimes I do that prep before, but sometimes I have to do it live if we're doing a live stream. And so I just kind of put them at ease so that they feel comfortable. They know what environment there is. They know who they're talking to. And then the second part is I like to do respectful research questions. And this is where I've read your book. And in your book, you say this, or I read this blog post that you wrote, and I found this really interesting. Let me ask you a question about that. So what you've done is you've been respectful to them, that they put out content and you cared enough to read it, to listen to it, to watch it. So I interviewed Molly Bloom at a Chain Exchange blockchain event, and Molly Bloom is the subject of this movie. And most people are like, oh, I saw the movie. And she wrote a book first. So I had read the book. And so that's the first thing I said to her. I said, I really love the book. It was really insightful. And I was impressed that the movie caught your voice so well. And that started our conversation in a way that where she then was so excited to talk to me because I was so respectful back to her that I cared about the things she cared about the most. So doing those kinds of things matter. And this is where you can make a note, maybe make your question as you're reading it. This is the only one where sometimes I structure a question or a bullet point to lead me to remember the question because I might not interview them for a couple of months. So I want to remember that. Defining questions are usually when they say something, I go, wait a second, let's define that for my audience because they may not understand that industry term or they may not understand that. Framing questions are where they might be talking about social media and I might say, okay, that's great, but what's social media? How can we frame this for podcasters specifically? And so I'm helping to frame it for my audience and ask the questions like, well, I heard that, but how do I apply that? Well, I want to be I'm the advocate for them and they appreciate that. Challenging questions are, I'm not a fan of being that sort of like disrespectful challenge. I'm a fan of going, you know what? I want to make you dive deeper on this. You may not want to talk about this, or you may never have talked about this before, or maybe in your book, but I want you to talk about this live right now with my audience. And I'm going to challenge them with asking them to dive deeper into that, to maybe answer something that's not there. It hasn't been there before. And then you've got to be prepared to ask follow-up questions quickly. You've got to be prepared to do that. I make notes during interviews. Sometimes I glance down and I just make a quick note or a quick bullet so I don't forget to follow up as soon as they're done. But I try to be engaged in the process, but I do make occasional notes because I definitely don't want to wait. Because good follow-up questions are a sign that you're a good interviewer. It's when you're sitting back or imagine listening to something, you're like, why didn't she ask that? she should have asked that. I would have asked that. Like, that frustrates your fans. So you want to make sure that you are always diving a little bit deeper and not just moving on to the next thing. Don't leave them hanging with a deeper question. And then personalizing questions. If you haven't gotten to their story or something, I'm losing my microphone, their story or something personal before you get to the end. At the end, I like to do that. So make sure you noted something personal. If you know that I have 3 daughters, or something like that, or that I work with my husband every day, at the very end, if it hasn't come up before now that I'm married and working with my partner, maybe you want to ask me that question. It's like, I know people want to know, like, what is that like? How do you make it work? And so, it gets me a chance to stop going out of education mode and being in how to and teach mode, and allows me to connect with the audience. So if you have not allowed that at the beginning, you must do it by the end. And so that's where I actually like to leave it, because I like to dive in deep, because I have a lot of impatient fans. That's how I feel. They're here to get data. They're here to get information. That's why you're on this webinar right now. You want to get in, and this masterclass is meant to give you detailed information. You're not there to hear my story, but you may want a little nugget of my story, because that may interest you, and you may want a little bit of that later. So it is your job as the host to make sure you bring that in somewhere along the line, either when appropriate or no later than the very end. And of course, that's a good time to ask them how people can find you. And of course, I always like to leave that into our blog post. So I always say to them that we're going to have all kinds of connections to this guest in our blog post at feedyourbrand.co, driving everyone to your podcast blog page and to the website itself. One thing for your fans to remember: not everybody's little URL. We do not do that. That is not the Brandcaster's way. It helps drive more traffic and more authority to you. And it also it's a service to your fans who are in their car driving, who are on the treadmill, who are running out, on the streets, that they don't have to write anything down. They know exactly where they can go. They don't have to remember it. They can go exactly to one place, and that's all they ever have to remember. So keep that in mind, although you do want to ask them, where is the best place to reach you? Is it on your website or in social media? Where would you like to connect with fans? So this is one of the things, networking to get even more, right? So how do we find these guests? So now we've vetted them, right? We've decided their share value. We also want to know where they're connected to, and what other things can they bring. Our South by Southwest opportunity came from one of our guests who said, you guys should be at South by Southwest doing the podcast. It was last year, and it was great. It was one of the best things at South by Southwest. And it was like, what podcast event? We didn't even know about it. And so he was the one who shared that with us. And so that's always something really great we get out of just the opportunity to guest, is to reach into a different network. But make sure you do that. Make sure you ask those questions, like, where else do you think I should be? What else do you think I should do? You can do that post-interview, like after the interview is closed, but having these guests help you. You've just served them. You've just gave them great PR value. You can ask them, who else should be my next guest? Like, these are opportunities for you to network to get even more. Now I'm going to talk about follow-up, ego bait. And ego bait is a term that we use here. It's an internal term. We don't ever use it outside with our guests. They never hear this term, but we do use it internally all the time. And I've probably talked about it on Facebook a ton of times. So I'm sure that they are out there knowing about it. But thinking about this, it's a really high-level follow-up. That's really what it's all about. And I'm going to show you some, and I'm going to talk with you a little bit about why it's so powerful and why it's so important. So remember how I told you that we had a lot of these high-value guests, and I would write these articles, and this is where it started in my column, is I couldn't get these people to share it, right? I wrote this article for them, and they wouldn't put it in their website, and they weren't sharing it out in public, and I was like, I don't understand what's going on and why that's not happening. So I started to ask some questions and say, hey, why aren't you sharing this? And they're saying, well, I can share the link, but that's it. And then after that, I need to have a graphic made, and I don't have a graphic team, or I don't know how to put it in my website. Like, I have a press page, but I don't know how to update it, and I really don't have a web development team on staff, or on retainer. So I really don't know how to do this. And so I thought, that's a problem I can solve. And so I created something I call EcoBait graphics. So it's Feed Your Brand number 5. So it's the Feed Your Brand podcast number 5. It's one of our most popular podcasts. It's probably the one that gets the most listens to, next to the interview questions and next to my speaker tips. Those are probably the 3 top ones. But it is a faster track to authority because it forces the guest to actually share it. And so here's how we do it. Is sometimes we write 1 or 2 different styles of EcoBait. One is where you say something great when you introduce them. And sometimes I write that out for myself so I remember, because I want to make sure that I say their name, that I really talk about what's unique about them. It's not like, oh, this is the greatest party planner in the world. I want to be saying this party planner knows how to make a party personal. And that might be the thing, right? So I want to really make a statement that would become a soundbite. And I did this once. I did this with my, who's now my good friend, but I interviewed John Livesey for an Inc. article. And in it, I called him the pitch whisperer, the one you want to take into your pitch with you. And so he put that on the cover of his book. So I not only did it and he shared it everywhere, he started calling himself the pitch whisperer because I coined that and I said that. So, that's where it can even be more powerful. It can bring even more power back to your brand as well. But you want to say something that's soundbite-ish. It's small. It's a sentence. It's simple, but it really shows the value to your audience about that person. The other thing might be a quote that you say. So a quote that is said in the show, right? And that could be something brilliant that they say. And then you put a picture of them and you put the quote that they say. So you can do it either way. Both of them get shares, because if I get this and somebody says this is brilliant about me, that's a testimonial. I'm going to absolutely share it. And if it comes in this cool looking graphic with a quote, and our pictures are side by side and our logos are side by side, I'm actually going to share that. And then the other one is, it helps when I share it out, they want to tell their friends about it. So if they said something brilliant and I share it, then they reshare it. And so that's where that one started. This is another good example of that. Where Mitch Russo here is from Your First 1,000 Clients is the podcast. David Corbin brings his heart, intelligence, and brilliance to the table to see the solutions quickly. This is the perfect quote, right? He says the person's name. He's describing why he's so valuable, why he's so important. This is not about what David Corbin's business is. It doesn't even say any of that. But now I want to listen and I want to know more, because heart, intelligence, brilliance, that sounds really, and seeing solutions quickly, that sounds like great no matter what that is. And so this is where David can't help sharing this. I can't help wanting to click on it when I share it and now go to that podcast and listen to it. Now, the one thing that we do that is a little bit deeper is we send this out in an email follow-up. So once the episode goes live, it's actually automated in our system. So anyone who works with us on production has the access to it. And we do it for them. And so Mitch Russo is one of our clients. And so in this particular case, what would happen is we create this graphic. This graphic is not only sent to David Corbin because his email address is put in there and said guest follow-up needs to go to him. He not only gets that, but he also gets code that he can just copy and paste either into his web page, or he can give directly to his VA or his web manager or whoever that might be, to put it directly into his website. And what that does is it links this image directly with the podcast blog post on Mitch's site. So the two things are directly connected. There's no mistakes made. That high value backlink is immediately created from any press page or any place that David Corbin decides to put this on his website. So that's one of the things. And we email that out, remind them to share, and remind them to, subscribe and like the podcast as well. And we do that. And then 1 week later, we follow up and remind them and send it again and say, hey, if you didn't see this before, I want to remind you to make sure to do this. We then also suggest that you take your virtual assistant or your actual assistant, if you have one, and you check all the guest sites within a month and make sure that they've actually posted it on their site. If they don't, ask them if they need help with that. And so that's also something, do you need the code again? Can I help you with this? Is there something I can do? Because this is going to add value to you, and you should be putting the ink logo on your website, or, you should be putting this quote on your website. It's going to add tremendous value to your business. How can I help you make that happen? And so we try to facilitate that. That's what our team does on our particular podcast. That's something you have to do personally because you have the connection with the guest, or you can have your team do it because it's still coming from your company. But that's a great follow-up, just to make sure that they've all shared it and done it. So that's ego bait. And that's how we become bingeable, right? Because you want to attract followers. And, this is a great case. Scott Carson, his video cast has been listened to just under 250,000 times. And this is an old statistic because he just gave me some new ones. And he hit 500,000. Basically, videos doubled his audience in 10 months of the first year he was podcasting. So he was doing video to podcast to blog posts. But all of that along the way was adding a lot of followers. And it was also building traction with the followers he had because they were staying engaged. The founder of Java Press, he has a podcast called Stay Grounded, the Stay Grounded podcast. And you have to make something of it. And he uses his to attract a tribe that are fanatics about coffee, where it comes from, what the beans are like, how you grind it, the ritual of it. So he's really attracting by diving deep into the perfect model and attracting exactly the right people that he wants. And then he sells some products. And he sells them services, and he sells them subscription. So there's a lot of things that come out of that form, but he starts with that tribe and showing his connection and passion to it. So anyone he brings on as a guest has to have that kind of level of commitment and passion. Getting more clients. We talked about this before. Dr. Kevin Pecca actually just talked about him in a mastermind today. He uses his podcast to connect with patients because he can't see everyone, right? He can't make a personal connection to everyone, but he can suggest podcasts to them if they're golfers and he's got a podcast on that. Or he can meet with a new client and then say, I'd love to spend more time with you, but here's a couple of podcasts you might want to listen to. It'll give you a deeper dive into how I work. And this gives him a chance to close more clients, right? And to keep them engaged with him. So hope is not a strategy. A guest plan is, as well as a topic plan. A content strategy is going to get you. It's not hope. It's going to get you It's going to get you to meet your goals. So especially if we do the right things in the right order with the right resources. So that means we got to do our assignment for next week. Well, we're not going to meet again next week, but I am going to send you a video. I'm going to send you a video about how to, once you've got all this content, how you now turn it into a social post plan for 2019. So I'm going to send you a special video next Tuesday about that as well. So your assignment is to vet your guest list. Get a booking calendar. I cannot tell you how unprofessional it is not to have a booking calendar. You should absolutely have a calendar if it only has one time a week or one time a month, whatever it has on it. But that way they're filling out all the information that they need, their bio, their headshot. They're giving you everything at once. So you have everything in one place, but it also looks professional and it makes the guests feel very comfortable, especially if they're using an assistant or a marketing firm. And you take a lot of time out of the process of going back and forth with VAs. So I find the shows that don't have booking calendars don't book as fast as the ones that do. Now, if you don't have one and you just want to get started and you don't want to miss out on the opportunity, I had somebody do this to me yesterday, actually. And he said, can I just use your booking calendar and book a time slot that works for me? And then we'll do it at that time and I will send you the Zoom link after because I'm still setting up my booking calendar. And because I already knew him and so he wasn't, a random stranger, I said, absolutely, go ahead. And that's what he did. So he booked at a convenient time for me. I didn't have to execute or do anything. And I'm still got calendared on his calendar. And so there was no emails going back and forth. So that really worked. Prepare invitation and email follow-ups. Well, I'm going to, as soon as I close out this PowerPoint, I'm going to give you our page of templates. So this is my free gift to you who are on Zoom and watching this. You can link directly through and get our follow-up emails. So exactly what do they look? How do we send them? What does this follow-up emails look like? What is the sort of email prep that might be in our booking calendar? Because we do send one. So as soon as somebody books in our calendar, they're immediately getting a follow-up. Thank you. Here's how to be prepared. A week before they get prep tips to remind them to use headphones, have a microphone if they have one, put themselves in a good place for recording. And guys, I apologize about the environment, the lighting and stuff here, but I'm on the road and I'm in a hotel room. room. I'm not in my office, so you've got to make do with what you got to make do with. But at least they could be more prepared and maybe prep for that, and maybe bring their headphones or bring a microphone with them if they get these prep tips ahead of time. And then, of course, we send those prep tips out an hour, I think it's an hour before the actual show, to remind them again. And so these follow-up emails, I've got all the copy that we use, change it, personalize it, make it for you. And then the last thing I want you to do is just go for it and ask. This is the thing. You could have high reach guests on there. I've never actually been turned down before, but if I didn't ask, it's a definite no. So make sure that you go out and ask, go out and reach. And don't be afraid if you're a new show, just be honest about it. Say, I'm a brand new show, but I have a complete strategy. I think our audiences are aligned, and here's why I think you'll make a great guest, and here's the value I'm going to add back for you, because I'm going to share it, because it's going to be one of my first episodes. It's going to get binge listened to quickly, because you're going to be there in my launch. Then you're going to be mixed with these other high value guests who've already agreed to come on. Like, those are things that you can say, and they're very convincing. And honestly, for a lot of times, I find people aren't even vetting or checking out the podcast on the other end. Shame on them, but that's true. So they may not even know that your show isn't live on iTunes yet. I've had it happen. So this is our bonus masterclass that I'm going to be sending you, Social Post Planning. I'm going to send you next Tuesday at 5 o'clock Pacific time, so you get it at the same time as this episode was, or as this masterclass was. And so there'll also be a couple of templates that go with it. So if you're listening to this on Facebook and you are not on the Zoom invitation, then make sure you do it, because you'll get full access to the replays and the templates and all of that. So make sure you link back through to that. And somebody will post that in the comments if it's not already there. I'm going to stop my share. I'm also going to make sure to send you right now in the chat. Here is the link to the communication templates. So for those of you who are live with me then we would love to now ask questions. But make sure you click that link and save it. And also it will be in the follow-up email, so we can make sure and get that to you. So let's go to some questions. Who's got some questions for me today? I'll give you guys a minute to type in. Let's see. Oh, normally I get in questions all along the way. Haven't gotten many today. So I see a bunch of names I know. Welcome to the show, and I'm so glad you guys were on, and hope I've been able to help you. I've got about 15 more minutes before I have to run somewhere else, but I look forward to answering some questions. I get Terry Peppy. Do you have a podcast or training on how to launch a new podcast? Yes, absolutely we do. So in our podetize.com platform, there are resources, and there's a whole resource tab, and that's available to anyone who hosts with us. So just hosting, you have to put your show somewhere, so you have to sign up with a host. But if you want to sign up with us before you've actually started your show, and you just sign up, that gives you access to all of our course, and there's videos, there's templates, there's strategy, plus all of this that you have here. We have a monthly coaching call, and we're looking at next year we might do 2 a month. And so we also have that available to anyone. So it doesn't matter whether you're what we call a DIY, a do-it-yourselfer wanting to set yourself up and do it all by yourself, that's fine. Or if you're using done-for-you services, you do not have to do that to be on the podetize.com platform. But if you're there, we're going to provide you all the coaching services just absolutely the same. You just don't get the one-on-one. You get the group environment. But other than that, you do. And that's for as low as, I'm just going to say this right here so you guys realize, that's for as low as $49 a month. So you're not paying $497 for a course or anything like that. Ours is, you just have to be on our platform, and that's all. And while you're there, you're going to be loading up your podcast to it, and we have an unlimited amount of space, so you won't cap out. You can run up to 5 shows for that same price, so you'll be able to do what you need to do. So we believe we have the best package for growing a podcast on the Podetize platform. So whether you're a do-it-yourself or a done-for-you. So I hope that answered the question, and thank you, Lynn, for the compliment. I appreciate it. Let's see. Who else? Who else has a good question? I hope, did some of you do your homework, and did you guys put your guest list together? I hope that's the case. I don't know. Maybe I can check Facebook here. I hope I can check Facebook and see if there's any questions. Typically, I'm not supposed to answer them according to Alexandra, but why not? Let me make sure my volume's off so I don't end up getting any kind of weird thing. Let's see. I am not finding any questions. Is there any special tool or software used to schedule your podcast topics and guests? That's a really good question, Terry. So to schedule our podcasts, so we use a scheduling software. We like to use Schedule Once, but we have 2 hosts, so we have 2 calendars to integrate, and it's complicated, and we run multiple shows because I have Feed Your Brand, I have Product Launch Hazards, I have the New Trust Economy. So like, as you can see, I'm always schizophrenic and what show am I doing right now? And so we do use the Schedule Once to be able to manage multiple shows and all of that. It gets expensive. We spend well over $200 on it now because of how many things we use. But there are lots of free ones out there. Calendly is good. I like it if you spend just a little bit money to make sure that you're able to use the forms and the follow-up. So if the free version doesn't have a form for them to fill out while they're booking and a follow-up emails that you can send through it, then don't use it. Roger, you're asking about HubSpot. We use HubSpot here. We find it has a much higher open rate for the emails that we do send. So that's really well. And we can also track and make sure that our guests receive the email and that or anyone has received the email, and especially with the ego bait, when those things go out, if you want to send them manually or send follow-up, HubSpot would be a great way to do it. We don't actually use it that way because it's an automated system that comes from our team, so we don't actually use HubSpot for the email follow-up. But it would be great for you if you're going to do it on your own. I don't know about if HubSpot has a calendar. I've never used it before. But most of the calendar programs, they do have, for a small fee, have the forms and follow-up emails, or reminders you call them, but you can customize those reminders. And as long as you can do that, those calendar programs are worth doing. That's my favorite way to do it. There's a whole series of questions I like to ask, like to make sure we get their bio, their email address that they want to receive notifications to, that making sure that you've gotten their headshot as well, because you want to use that in graphics. You want to put a profile in on the post page, right? So you definitely want to make sure you get those. Those are the major things that you need in there. I do leave a note space to say, is there anything you want me to review before? Is there anything that you're promoting that you want me to know about? And what link, what website, what link would you like us to link back to you? So sometimes they want their LinkedIn profile and sometimes they want their website. Making sure you ask that up front so you can be very sure about the technical side of producing the blog post that goes along with it. HubSpot can be expensive. That's the only other comment I have on that one, Roger, is that can be expensive the more features you start using and the more emails you start sending out. So it really depends on how you're using it, because, I mean, it depends on what you're going to use it for. Alexandra is actually the best one to answer on that. She's our HubSpot expert. Let's see. If you can't get bios, links, or a photo from guests, what do you do? Well, you should have Googled them. So you should be able to find them. I usually will steal their photo from LinkedIn, their bio from there as well. And if they don't like it, well, then they should have provided it to you. So like, that's kind of one of the things that I do is, and if you didn't get it in the calendar, like let's say you've already booked a bunch of people and you didn't get it in your calendar already, then go ahead and send them a follow-up email and say, hey, before the show airs, I really need to get this from you to make sure that I'm linking back to you properly and making sure I'm giving you the proper bio and credit. So that's usually how we do it. I hate to assume that they kept their stuff up to date, but if that's the only bio out there, I'd rather use that than nothing. So LinkedIn is probably the preferred way that I do that. Oh, what is my favorite question to ask a guest? Okay, so I never ask the same question twice. That's kind of my thing. But I do commonly ask about the risks because, and I usually joke about it, that that's the hazards of doing this, right? Because I'm a hazard. So, but asking about the risk, asking about the pain is always a great way to dive in it. What lesson did you learn that was your most hard-earned lesson? So I always ask it differently every time, but it really is getting at the same thing. When you dive into a pain point, you're going to connect better with your audience. You're going to provide them more value, and you're going to lead your guests to really giving great educational pieces. So that's why I love that side of things. Asking them to tell their story is too broad, and sometimes they ramble. So that's definitely my least favorite question to ask. So anyone else have anything else that they'd like to ask? I've got a few more minutes. I was going to check Facebook here, and let's see. Oh, we've got a few comments. Oh, sweet. Thank you, John, and everyone. Oops, I got to. Asking them to tell their story is too broad. My media is all up, so you can hear me speaking. So thanks, John. I appreciate it. John Jubilee on Facebook, one of my friends and clients, and absolutely adore what he's doing in the health and fitness space. Great podcast coming up next year. And so anyway, what do you do when your guest interview is low quality of microphone or connection? Okay. So this is why we book an hour-long appointment, because sometimes these things happen. So it happens that a lot of times, like I'm in an environment that's a little echoey. There's about nothing I can do about it. Can I put a towel down on the table? Can we make some adjustments to the way that they're angled so they're not speaking directly into the computer, which can be bouncing back sound? Maybe they don't have a microphone. My worst is when you have earbuds in that have a mic on them and it goes click, 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 click. That's horrible. So you definitely want to do away with anything that's doing that. Anything that's buzzing or doing that is going to be really hard. If they're just faint, decent editing can fix some of those things. Can't fix everything, but it can fix some of those things. If you get a big bang in the background or all of those things, those are easy enough to take out, and I don't really worry about those. A dog barking, phone ringing, it's real life. Like people don't mind that as much. But when you've got a constant annoying sound, that is the worst. So you really do want to make sure that none of that is going on as you get started with them. And so that's one of the areas at which I'm always looking at, making sure that we make sure that we're listening. Hey, does this sound good? And then the other big issue is that a lot of times you're going to get, if you're on Zoom like I am right now, but I'm recording with an interview subject, they're on the other end, we're going to have a 2-track recording, but if they're hearing my voice, it's going to get mixed into their track if they don't have earbuds plugged in. So that's why we send out an email recommending that they buy earbuds without a microphone. Or also we check the settings and we remove that. And so we check the microphone settings on Zoom and we say, don't use the headphone microphone, use the computer microphone. So we just start to separate those things out. So getting a little bit technical about it, but that information, there is a video on that, on better sound and how to improve that. But sometimes, there's just nothing you can do. They're calling in or whatever. And you just have to call it and just say, you know what, this is not going to be a good guest. This is not going to be a good interview. I can't air this. Let's reschedule when you can be in a better place and it's not going to be a problem. This is the thing with Blog Talk Radio. There's a lot of dial-in and it's horrible. It's really annoying to listen to, and that's where it gets bad. And yet a lot of entrepreneurs have said, oh, that's okay. They do it on Blog Talk Radio, so it must be good enough. And from, those that are listening to it with their earbuds on, running on the treadmill, wherever they are, you know what? Low quality is low quality and it starts to annoy you. You can forgive it in video, but you really can't forgive it in audio track only. So it is one of the most important things. Microphones, just to say, you don't need an expensive microphone. This microphone's like an $80 microphone. Not expensive. I've had it for quite some time. It works, right? There's nothing wrong with it. And it lasts. And so you don't need an expensive microphone, an expensive setup to have decent quality sound. You just need to have it directed and somewhere like that, and you need to not have that annoying background sound going on. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap up a little bit unless anyone else pops in with a question. But I really hope that you guys got a lot out of this. I'm going to also do a live stream in early January on time management, because I think that's also an issue for a lot of you. And block scheduling has really helped me. This is just a couple things to be thinking about, and that's where having a calendar program can really help you do that. I'm going to set aside these 2 days to record guest interviews, or I'm going to set aside a single day a week or a month or whatever it is that works for you, to make it manageable, to make sure that you are consistently on top of it. So when you don't see, oh my gosh, in February I don't have anyone booked on those days, in January you get your butt in gear and you make sure that you remind people to book. And so you have to constantly be pushing at it. I'm always trying to be a month ahead. So we want to make sure you know that's part of why you have this plan, so that you can do that. So you can make sure that you're building this up for yourself. And you know, if you've got some time and you know you're going to be traveling, you can also book ahead. So you could do twice as many in January if you know you're going to be out all of February. So just keep that in mind. October is my busiest month, so I'm always trying to bank up in the summer. And, you know, and that's an easier time for a lot of people, a lot more flex scheduling. So thinking about that as a part of a really good plan, your time management matters as well. So I hope this has been really useful and helpful. If you didn't catch this whole thing, if you came in part way or whatever, you'll be able to get this on the replay. That'll come out later this week or early next week. You'll get the email that'll give you the replay from this. And of course, you could probably dive on Facebook and friend me. I'm Tracy Hazard with 2 Z's. You can find me there, and you'll be able to check out the live stream as well. And then the live stream will always be on @FeedYourBrands Facebook page, and you can find us anywhere. Check on feedyourbrand.co and podetize.com if you need to connect with us, if you need to ask questions. That's what we're here for. Our goal is to make sure that your show grows. So some of that requires strategy and content planning, and if I can be your guide along the way, then I've succeeded. So thank you so much for being here today, and I will be back in probably the new year with some lives, but I'll be back next week to sending you a video, so you'll be seeing me again. Thanks, everyone. Take care.